And welcome to the 2021 McKinnon Distinguished CEO Series. This evening, we're going to enjoy a conversation between Brad Preber, CEO of Grant Thornton, and Dr. Robert Del Campo, who's the Senior Executive Director of Anderson's Corporate and Community Engagement Office. Following the conversation, we're very honored to induct President and shareholder of Newberry & Associates, Brett Newberry, into the Anderson Hall of Fame. In tonight's audience, I'm really happy to see Anderson students. If you are a student, would you please raise your hand so we can see you? Thank you for being here. Thank you, yes. We have advisory board members here with us. If you're an advisory board member, will you please raise your hand so we can recognize you? Thank you. We're glad you're here. Thank you. If you are faculty from Anderson, will you please raise your hand so we can recognize you? Thank you. Glad you're here. And we also have staff here as well, and I want to thank our staff for those, especially those who participated in making this evening possible. So thank you to our staff. Thank you very much. I'd especially like to recognize a couple of leaders from UNM who are here with us. In particular, Dr. Rich Brody, who is here as Anderson Accounting Department Chair. Rich, please let us recognize you. Raise your hand. Thank you. And we are joined tonight by Doug Brown, who is the President of UNM Board of Regents. Thank you, Doug, for being here. So before we get started, I just want to remind you that we've placed on your chair a card that has a QR code and lists ways to engage with Anderson. I encourage you to click on this, take it with you, write on there if you prefer to do it in writing. But it's because of our active alumni and community that you all make up that makes us who we are as Anderson. All of you are what make us proud. You are what we produce, and it is your engagement with us that's incredibly important and that keeps this place alive, rich, relevant, and continuing into the future. Let us know how you're interested in engaging with the school, and let us know how we can help you, and we thank you for your leadership and your participation tonight. Now, without further ado, let me welcome Dr. Rob Del Campo and Brad Preber.
All right, thank you all, and thanks, Brad, for joining us. Brad is the CEO of Grant Thornton, LLP, the fifth largest audit, tax, and advisory firm in the U.S., and the largest global member firm of Grant Thornton International Limited. He's led GTUSA through a challenging transformation to increase revenues and profits and reduce costs, all while ensuring that the firm meets the needs of its people. His dynamic 35-year career includes extensive experience that spans diverse roles, from consultant, expert witness, forensic accountant, fraud investigator, and SEC financial expert. He has investigated cases alleging fraud, waste, and abuse, and frequently speaks, writes, and teaches on fraud-related matters. Please help me welcome Brad Preber.
That doesn't make you yawn. I don't know what will. That's all you want to do is hear from an accountant, right?
Of course.
Hope your drinks are full.
Exactly. Well, Brad, thanks for joining us. And post-COVID, it's great to see you face-to-face and in person. And all of you, thanks for joining us as well. Just start off with a few questions. Have you experienced any of the following COVID symptoms within the past 48 hours?
I'm feeling pretty hot right now. I don't know whether that's the...
Just checking. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
No, but seriously, you've had a wonderful career. We had a great chance to visit today and last week and hear a little bit about what you've done in your career. But what's really exciting is you coming and talking to our students and faculty today as part of the CEO series. But what adds to that is the fact that you are a UNM alum. So let's take a step back to those early days when you came to college and what really brought you to the University of Mexico and the Anderson School. What were those first steps to develop your career?
You're hoping this is going to be some exciting story, aren't you?
I am.
Let me add that my father also graduated from the University of Mexico, a double E in 1958, for those of you that are interested. So the reality is that I came from a dysfunctional family, a broken home, and I was on my own probably earlier than I should have been. So entering college as an imperative really was more around affordability. And so from that standpoint, I was a presidential scholar. I was able to go to the university at the same time, work locally, I had family members here as a support group to some extent and friends. But the reality is that almost everything we were doing at that time, and that's in the late 1970s, at the high school level was geared to pre-engineering. So heavy math, I had several programming languages under my belt by the time I graduated high school. And so I entered UNM believing that I was going to be a math major. That's what I thought I was going to go into. I was a person of meager means, and so from that perspective, I needed to work. And went to the professor at one point, about the second year into college, and said, gosh, how long do I have to go to school to be able to get a job in mathematics? And he said, well, a master's, you probably get a job, but realistically, you need a PhD. And I said, how long is that going to take? And they said, probably 6, 7 years. And I said, I don't have 6 or 7 years to go to school. It's got to be something faster. They said, well, I'm not sure, but I think they use some math and accounting. Why don't you go check the accounting school? And so I went and I registered for my first course. I talked to the registrar and switched over and took my first accounting class. And I sat in there absolutely dazed and confused. Loans or assets? I'm like, what? Debits on the left, credits on the right. I said, what are you talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about. So I ended up withdrawing from that class, taking an I, an incomplete, and I memorized the entire book and never got anything less than an A in any other accounting class from that point on. So that's how I got into it.
Interesting. Okay, so after you sort of put to the side Fortran and BASIC and all those wonderful...
Cobalt, yep.
Cobalt, great. I mean, I thought those would be good jokes. People would know those. So how does your career start? So you complete your work at Anderson. You've got a BBA in accounting, super employable. We know that now, right? So how do you enter the workforce?
I would say as I reflect back, it's a lot more about being an immature, inexperienced, young adult making a decision based on where your friends go. Does that sound familiar? So at the time, it was a very hot job market, much like it is today. I had somewhere between 12 and 15 offers, oil and gas companies, banks, insurance companies, the big four. At the time, it was a big 8, by the way. And so from that standpoint, I gravitated towards the firm that had more people that I knew, and I felt comfortable I could ask questions, and in a sense, feel like I wouldn't be as much at risk, personally at risk for failure. So that's how I ended up making the decision.
Okay, that makes sense. So you take your first job, you show up the first day on the job, and what are some of the biggest surprises that now you probably take for granted at your level of the organization?
I don't know if these are take for granted so much as the business has just changed so significantly in the 40 years I've been doing this. So at the time, there really wasn't a heavy influence on what discipline you went into. So audit, tax, there really wasn't a choice of going into advisory and public accounting firms. It was a pretty foreign concept at that time because of independence rules. And so ultimately, I showed up, and I graduated in December, so I show up in January. So guess what was busy season, right? It was tax for me, and there was a bunch of tax work to be done. So they said, oh, you want to start in tax? I said, yeah, sure, I'll do whatever. And I found out I actually won't do whatever. It was a terrible job. And what happens is individuals bring in, at this time, there's no computer downloading of information. They're bringing paper, boxes and boxes of paper. And you have an inbox that's filled with these forms, and then you put them in an outbox at the end of the day. And you do this for 14 to 16 hours a day. And you read their information, and it was a company called Fast Tax. It was based in Dallas. And you'd fill out these little bubbles on these forms, right? Name, B, R, A, all day long. That's what you're doing, all day long. And then you'd ship them off, and they'd come back the next day with all these syntax errors. You filled the bubbles in wrong. So you spend the day correcting everything you did the day before. So imagine doing that for 3 months. I said, I can't do this. This is not what I am made out for. So I ended up switching to audit after that busy season, and that's where I really found my first love of the accounting business was doing the audit work.
Okay. Well, so we had a great talk at lunch. You told me about all sorts of great stories, maybe some that are appropriate to share today, maybe some that aren't. But there seemed like in your career there were a number of firsts, right? You were the first person to do this or to do that, and that kind of even started in your college career. But tell us a little bit about a couple of those firsts that you're particularly proud of or infamous for and just give us a little overview of that.
Yeah, I mean, first fall in the category of, I hope many of you can appreciate these comments, is I have a life of glorious mistakes that I've been able to turn into opportunities. Massive mistakes, I mean, life-changing mistakes that were extraordinarily large. And so when you look at first, it's a lot about being ready. And I remember this very clearly. Harris will recall this. We used to work together in a study group, and there was something that came clear to me one day, that most of us spend our entire lives getting ready. And getting ready means, in sports analogy, you spend a lot of time on the bench. You believe you're ready. You know that you're just waiting for that day that the coach says, Brad, you're in. And you're ready. But most of your life, you're really not ready. And so from that perspective, these first come along because I was ready, the opportunity presented itself, and I was able to do that. So I was sharing earlier today, and this will be indicative of the kind of student I was, so I'm a little shy to share this, but you'll get the point. We had an accounting association at the university, and it was led by one of the students. And at the time, I was really dialed into starting an accounting career fair. And he really wasn't motivated to do that. And so I pushed the issue, and I got a contingency of students in the association to throw him out and put me in as the president so we could start a career fair. And so that was kind of the beginnings of the first set of accounting career fairs that we did, that we still have today, as a matter of fact. The whole idea being that I was kind of a see something, seize the opportunity, and get it done. When you kind of look at other firsts, by way of example, is when I moved into the Grant Thornton organization, ultimately we had to open an office in Phoenix, and one didn't exist. And it was the first greenfield office we'd ever opened, meaning we'd always merged with another firm. This one was green. 3 employees, starting from scratch, no clients. 3 or 4 years later, that managing partner left to run Dallas, and I was tapped to take over the Phoenix Albuquerque office. It was a joint office called the Desert Cluster. I was the first non-audit or tax partner in our firm's 95-year history. I was a consulting partner, advisory, to run an office. Now run the tape forward. We had a new CEO that when I was in that role, he changed strategy, and the first thing that he asked me to do is to close the Albuquerque office, the office I was from. So I was the first partner to close an office they started in and successfully sell it without firing any single individual. Left there, and basically the part of the reason I got into the forensic side of what I do is I was an audit partner. I audited public and private companies, and then there was a large engagement that the federal government put out there. It was part of a budget bill, but there was a rider on that bill to reconcile Indian trust funds. It had never been done. So think of it being like your bank, where you've got individual accounts, you've got corporate accounts, but the bank never sent you a statement ever, ever. The government had never sent individual Indians or tribes a statement of their holdings and trust. So I was hired, and the firm was hired to do that work, and ultimately completed it the first time that had ever been done. We completed from scratch, going back to records from 1889 treaties, records for tribes, and we're able to issue statements for them for a 20-year period. We weren't able to do it for the individual Indians. That was 300,000 people, much more difficult for the government to find the records. So at the end of the day, they sued the government for an accounting. Well, at the time, I was the foremost expert on Indian trust records. So the Department of Justice hired me for my first ever expert witness job to represent the federal government as the individual Indians sued for trust accounts. And I had to explain why they couldn't be prepared. The absence of records and so on. It basically made it impractical, if not impossible, to fulfill their demands. So that's the kind of thing along the way that just happened to be this series of firsts, unusuals. I've done a number of very large landmark cases. I did the largest trademark damages case as an expert witness. And for those of you that don't get expert witnesses, if you think about a civil trial, the last witness in every civil trial is the damages guy. I'm the damages guy. I tell you how much the price tag is on the lawsuit. So I'm always the person that the attorneys, especially the opposing attorneys, love to hate. If they can get me to say something bad, then that's a big win for them. So at any rate, I did, for example, the largest land swap case ever in the history of the United States. The entire swampland of Florida was swapped for a property on the Indian School in Phoenix, Arizona, and there was a payment dispute, and I represented one of the parties in that. The largest trademark suit ever in the history of the United States. There was a multi-level marketing firm that used the actual photo from Jonathan Livingston Seagull in their proprietary materials. The author of Jonathan Livingston Seagull sued them for billions of dollars in misuse of trademark. So that's the kind of stuff that I spent my career doing. I did several investigations, several very high profile, including recent investigation into one of the largest criminal events related to the sale of narcotics, the recent narcotics that you've seen. So it's interesting. I tell you though, I'm getting close to retirement, and those of you that are attorneys or judges or whatever, the last thing you want to do for a career is be an expert witness. That job sucks too. It's very stressful. You get attorneys that are not very nice to you.
So your job sucks, is
Yeah.
basically what you're telling me.
Yeah, I look back and man, there's some things I did that I don't know. I look back and ask myself, man, you must have been really stupid back then.
But that all brings you to today. Right?
Yeah.
So, well, let me just take a step back. You mentioned, all the work you've done with the Indian Trust work and, working with the Native communities. And I know earlier today you talked a little bit about, how diversity, equity, and inclusion, ESG is just so important right now and really being focused on not only in the media, but also by companies, and corporate social responsibility in relation to diversity has become a lot more relevant, I think, and in a good way. So how do you think that your work, I'm guessing it probably wasn't easy to be sort of this, kid from Albuquerque who kind of walks in and does this work where you're trying to settle Indian trust land sort of things. How has that impacted your view on diversity, equity, and inclusion moving forward in your career?
Let me answer it this way. Coming from New Mexico, and Dean Montoya and I have talked about this quite a bit, coming from New Mexico and then going somewhere else to live, you recognize pretty quickly that you have a mixture of cultures here that is extraordinarily unique. And the thing that's interesting about it is those cultures are proud and unhidden. What do I mean by that? Well, when I moved to Arizona and I tried to hire a landscape guy, it was an individual that was Mexican. He would not look me in the eyes. I was extraordinarily uncomfortable with it. It's just culturally there, being from Mexico was embarrassing. They were afraid they were going to be turned in. They didn't want to be discovered. And I grew up with Mexicans and Hispanics, and for me, those are my classmates. These are my friends. These are the people that I hang out with and I love and enjoy. So it's very unique, and it forms your views. Part of my story is I did spend my senior year in high school, because of some really unusual family circumstances, with a Native American family. And so I began to learn a lot about their values and culture and things like that. And so diversity, equity, and inclusion for me is for me been learning the difference between empathy, which is listening actively, intently, to switching that to compassion. And that's listening with empathy, but doing something about it. Enough with the programs, enough with the talk. Do something about it. Make a change. And so in the role that I'm in today, I actually get to do that. I get to make that change. I get to stop listening to excuses and signing papers and so on. And so in our firm, I issued our first diversity report in the 98-year history of our firm. It's not pretty, but we've got to start somewhere. I issued the second, both under my administration, ESG report, and we doubled our scores in a single year. This is something I'm serious about, and I did a speech recently, and we talk about materiality as it relates to financial reporting, and it's fairly clear what it is for financial reporting purposes, but this ESG, environmental and social responsibility, is becoming clearer as something that investors want. Why? Because of psychological materiality. It's important to you what happens to our planet. It's important that people get treated fairly and equally. And so why shouldn't you invest in companies where that's something you believe in? And if you can't get information on it, why would you invest in it? We talked in the hallway and we had a little brainstorm, something that struck me. And that is, as I recall, many years ago, the tribal leader of the Mescalero Apache leaving his main building, his administrative building, and saying, the white people just don't get it. We don't care about the money. Right? We care about the earth. And so what if the whole thing is coming full circle and the Native Americans had it right all along? It's about the earth.
Interesting. That's profound. It's interesting how, you've taken that experience and kind of put it toward this mantra you mentioned earlier of be ready, right? You've kind of taken this experience and prepared yourself for it, and then when the opportunity presents itself, you're able to do something and do that compassionate approach. But when you talk about that idea of being ready and sort of being on the bench and waiting for your turn to get tapped on by the coach and go in and this guy got injured or whatever, you're up there. This concept of biding your time seems like something that we don't really see quite as much in today's students, right? That people want to kind of get out there. They're like the bank teller to CEO, straight up the corporate ladder sort of thing.
Yep.
Is that something you see as a reflection of today's culture? Or is maybe the idea of biding your time something that's baked into the culture of accounting? Or how does the things kind of work together?
Well, part of it is just in your DNA. So one of the things I'll share with you about my life is in working for Arthur Andersen, which is where I spent a big chunk of my career. I was there to the end of days, and there was an in-between time, but let me kind of explain the Arthur Andersen situation. So remember, I'm an audit partner, and then I do this trust fund work, and I become an expert witness. And so the CEO of Andersen at the time says, I need you to go to Houston. I need you to look at the work papers and tell us what happened. So I was shipped in November of 2001 to Houston to work behind literally armed guards, locked doors, to look through the work papers to see what happened. And I spent my time there until July of 2002 when I came back to my home office at that time, which was Phoenix, and it was empty. I was one of the last partners asked to resign. In that process, though, understand that that firm at the time eventually began eroding away because clients began exiting. Cash flow began dropping. And so what we didn't know is that by the time we had hit November 2001, the firm had run out of cash. And they have a finance arm that finances all of the capital that we put in the firm to buy our ownership stake. They had sold those loans to commercial banks. Didn't tell us. And these are on-demand loans, by the way. So that's happening in the background. Our partnership agreement at the time didn't provide for the distribution of profits unless we had them. So you can't distribute cash you haven't earned. And so we had over-distributed. And so by the time we got to April of 2002, tax day, we got a notice that we'd violated our partnership agreement and needed to claw back all of our earnings since November. Okay? We did an emergency meeting. We changed the partnership agreement. We continued to operate. And the firm ended up, by April, everybody was moving and going. By July, everybody was gone. So at the end of the day, I lost all my capital, lost all my retirement, lost my income stream, lost my position, and spent really the next several months, if not years, being maligned by everyone in my profession. I couldn't go in a professional conference without the first joke being about Arthur Andersen. I couldn't go to any type of corporate event without there being a story about Arthur Andersen and Enron, okay? Something I was extraordinarily proud to be part of. In July, when I tendered my resignation, Wachovia sent me a demand for 100% of my note. I got no income, I got no cash, I got no savings, I got nothing. So I ended up negotiating with them a 10-year, $8,000 a month to pay back my capital loan with no return. A year later, I had written off my investment, this $800,000, I'd written it off. And the IRS said, that's subject to self-employment tax. So they audited me, and I had to pay self-employment tax on the amount that I wrote off of my capital because it was considered ordinary income. So anyway, you get the idea. During that frame, I had a lot of time to think and ask myself, what the heck am I doing? What does success really look like? Was that it? Because, boy, it didn't feel like it was very successful. It felt pretty bad. And I started, thinking to myself and spending more quiet time and saying, okay, dialing into leadership books. And I came across a little orange pamphlet. It's probably 8 by 10, written by Robert Greenleaf, called Servant Leadership. And it just struck me. I thought, that's it. I've been found out. I spent my entire life admiring people that I respected and telling myself that's what I'm going to be when I grow up. And I put them on like pieces of armor, just tacked them on, every one I could get, right? Oh, I like what that father's doing. Oh, that individual's successful. I'm going to do that. Oh, I'm going to take those courses because that's really good. And you end up creating this giant falsehood about who you are. And then you have this moment, this Arthur Anderson moment, where you say, no, you're not. That's not who you are. I'm taking it all away. And so in that moment, you get to say, okay, but what if I don't like who I am? In this servant leadership book, I got into it, I studied, I've actually taught it since then, was really about putting others ahead of you and serving them and ultimately letting them choose who their leaders are based on how you serve them. And so that's how I try to serve today. And this time and space that you're talking about is created by the understanding that, oops, sorry, it's time to take, there's another story I can tell you about that. Is this ability to create this time and space in a place of need when all you have is noise in your head that's screaming failure, loss, bad dad, bad provider, and setting that aside to say, you don't have any worries. You can actually calm your mind to say, take the time to think through and understand you are never in control. So that's what I did. Reset myself, pulled myself up, started consulting myself, went to Grant Thornton. And here I sit today, a UNM grad, through the president of the Accounting Association. And I got elected in very dire circumstances to be the CEO of the 5th largest firm in the country. So.
That early coup obviously led to a lot of success.
Exactly.
But so it's interesting, you kind of come back to this and you talk about people a lot. You talk about serving people and you talk about compassion, which is great, and no offense in accounting, not necessarily what the first thing we think of. So I mean, the elephant in the room here, let's talk about COVID, right? So you kind of took the helm of Grant Thornton right before all this stuff hits, right? And you've got immediate crisis. I mean, there's some financial troubles in the firm, but I mean, let's talk about the people and how that kind of happened. So what did you do? So, hey, everyone's got to go home. What do we do? How does Grant Thornton respond to that? And how do you as the CEO lead that change and set the example for everybody else?
Yeah. So I was brought in to be the CEO of the firm under dire circumstances. The prior CEO had resigned because I asked him to. I was the chair of the board at the time. But it was an unusual situation where we had a confluence of bad circumstances and that ultimately caused us to have a lack of confidence in him as the leader, and so we asked him to resign. I stepped in with zero transition, nothing. I was basically said, here's your office. Okay, where's the stuff? No stuff. No computer downloads, no introductions to anybody, nothing. So we just created from scratch. We knew what we needed to do under the circumstances. From a business perspective, it was easy. I mean, it was 101. It was exactly what we know how to do, right? It was dial into the basics of the business. Cash is king. Get your cash flow up, bring your debt down, provide good service, and increase your margins. That stuff was the easy stuff. It was hard for the prior guy, but for me, it was easy enough to do. But the people themselves, when you go into a pandemic, I had to immediately be concerned about. I mean, my average employee is like 28. So these are young people with families that health risks are extraordinarily difficult for them to manage. And most of them have daycare and other arrangements that are extraordinarily hard to manage when you're in a pandemic. And so we were the first large firm in the U.S. to basically work from home. I made that order on March the 11th. And we quickly moved off-site because we have a distributed workforce, so people were everywhere on client sites. Middle of our busy season, by the way. Most public company filers are March 11th are finishing their books so we can finish our audits. And we'd never audited remotely before, so this was all very new to us. Fortunately, I'm going to talk about a series of good events. I had just secured a bunch of IT backups and additional capacity for us to work remotely that worked really well for us. But I had to change the mission. When I took the role, stewardship, accountability, and trust were missing. I had to get those back in the system. largely leaning on our culture, and the pandemic absolutely gravitated us together instead of apart. So it was a really nice thing to see. Changed the mission, which was largely a mission based on building value, to one that was 3 points that was easy for people to remember. Take care of your people, be there for your clients, and keep the firm strong. That's what you do every day. You do that, we win. It was people over profits in that moment. So we basically leaned into our clients heavily. We lost a massive amount of consulting work that was discretionary, somewhere between $300 and $500 million of backlog, gone. Start of the pandemic just went away. That's a lot of people sitting on the bench. So we made some really tough decisions against what our competitors were doing. We decided to defer raises, defer bonuses, and only give raises for promotions. And we elected to lay off no one. We laid off no one. And in that process, we rolled the bonus pool over to the following year, and we promised everybody double bonuses in the prior year if we met the financial objectives. We knocked the financial objectives out of the absolute park. We paid 3.5 times historical bonuses last year to our employees, and raises at record levels that we'd ever seen. And I'm still losing people today. It's a tough market out there. The point being is we made some really bold decisions to lean into our people and our clients, with the primary premise being care. We care about you. How do we take care of your needs? And then the firm's needs will take care of themselves.
Oh, that's great. I mean, you mentioned that a lot. You mentioned people quite a bit. You know, that's twice you've mentioned that you haven't gotten rid of people and that their job is so important and that sort of thing.
Well, I didn't tell you the first thing I did when I got the job is I did the largest layoff in the firm's history. So that's contributed to it.
Well, so you made up for it.
Yeah, we had some financial difficulties, and so part of the reason that I was put in the job is they knew I would not have a lack of confidence in making hard decisions. So I ended up laying off 300 people and 40 partners within 2 weeks of being on the job.
Well, we're going to move to some Q&A from the audience in a second, but before that, I want to talk about people that are important to you, right? So you're a new grandfather as of Saturday.
As of Saturday.
So congratulations.
My first
That's
grandchild.
Awesome, exactly. And that's here in New Mexico, right? Your daughter is here.
Yep.
And I know you've been spending more time here because it's important to you to be here for her and for the family and stuff. But how does that impact your commitment to New Mexico moving forward? You know, you've got retirement coming up. You've got the next generation of your family here. How do you kind of make that kind of switch?
You know, I've always had the commitment to New Mexico, and in particular the university. So I've worked in a number of different capacities. I mean, Dean Brown and I worked on the Anderson Alumni Group together, and some of the ideas we came up with. I mean, for example, I've now mentored my 5th student in the program that we kind of spun up in the back rooms back there when we were thinking about ways we could help at a career placement. And then I've done a number of different things, from doing speaking engagements to recruiting. I mean, like right now we got our firm back recruiting at the university, which we haven't done in many, many years. And then, of course, when Dean Montoya came in, I was ever too pleased to tell her, you know, my views on the University of New Mexico, and that is dial in on your diverse student body. Don't forget that we like season changes and green chili. And for goodness sake, you know, take some good ideas from those of us that are out in the business and put them to work in the school. And she's been doing that. So I now serve on the foundation board, been on that board for about 6 months now. And so my connectivity is probably as good as it's ever been, honestly.
Sounds good, and we're gonna keep it up. That's for sure. Do we have any questions from the audience? We have a couple of accounting students who've got some microphones there. If anyone has anything to ask. I mean, I've got plenty more. So we've framed this as sort of an inside the actor's studio kind of approach. So we've got the fun questions coming up here at the end. But anything about Brad's career? Maybe, yeah. Brad.
Yeah, I had several friends that were with Arthur Anderson. They lost their jobs over the Enron thing. And I wanted to ask Brad about, people probably don't remember this, but Arthur Anderson won their case before the U.S. Supreme Court. They were treated wrongly. But unfortunately, all of the assets have been depleted. They won the case, they won the war, but they lost the battle. And I thought that was such an injustice to Arthur Anderson.
Yeah, we have one asset. We still have that training center in St. Charles. So At any rate, yeah. Jim Laborde, who was the managing partner, you know, a good part of the time while I was here, and also, by the way, started the Hall of Fame. He actually stole the idea from where he did it at Oklahoma State. He just passed away a couple of months ago. But on the Anderson side, it's still a very large network, still very highly connected, and they're right now in the process of building a verbal history of the firm with the Alumni Association by taking verbal accountings of some of the experiences people had there. So it was a very special organization.
Very, very much so, I'm sure. So tell me a little bit more. You talked about being plugged in, you know, you talked about people and you talked about interacting and all those sorts of things. So you serve on the Dean's Council for Excellence at Anderson, and obviously there's a financial commitment associated with that, but why is that important as a way for you to direct your resources toward the university, both your time and finances?
I'll say this a little glibly, and I mean it to be glib. My investment in education at UNM has the highest return on investment of probably any student in the history of this university. My tuition was $350 a semester. I got an undergraduate degree, a BBA with a concentration in accounting. I'm now in a position where I'm leading 9,000 locally, 59,000 globally. That's a heck of a return on investment, right? So from my perspective, I have to pay that forward. I have to go back and say, hey, we need to recognize, you know, where that type of opportunity comes from in the university. I had a great experience here. I was talking earlier, I knew my professor. I was that guy they probably hated, to be honest with you. I knew all my professors. I knew them well. I spent a lot of time in their offices. And I'll recall I had my 40th birthday here, and I invited the professor that was living at the time, Professor Yackel, to come and enjoy the festivities. And he came and he brought me a gift. He had wrapped it in a box, and I took it out. And it was a piece of paper. It was a seating chart with the middle front row highlighted in yellow. He said, "That's where you sat." And I said, okay. So anyway, the point is that I have a lot of love and affection for the university. And I feel I have an obligation to give back. Some of it's financial, but some of it, quite frankly, is just being a resource to the deans or to the students or whatever. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I think, you know, from that standpoint, it can be easy to let my battery run.
You start screaming.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Yeah, anyway.
Well, I think you certainly do, and you're certainly paying it forward, and I think it's really appreciate that. I know all the students appreciate that. We had a great interaction with the students earlier today. But let's get to know you a little bit more. Let's go to some of the background here, and any of you that are familiar with James Lipton and the Inside the Actor Studio, there are a set of questions that he asks every time, and they're sort of one-note kind of answers, and I'll edit a couple of these for you. It actually comes from the Proust questionnaire, if you're interested in looking that up. You know, French novelists, not exactly something we look at in the business school, but okay, Brad, give me some answers here. What is your favorite word?
My favorite word is probably grateful.
Okay, grateful. I can see that. What is your least favorite word?
Hateful.
Okay.
I mean, it's particularly relevant today. I mean, so much hate in the world right now.
What sound or noise do you love?
There's really two, and one's, you know, particularly relevant to the fact that I just had a grandchild. When babies are real small and they make that cooing noise, you know, I like to dial into that noise. Second thing is I compete in fly fishing, have for years, and there is just something super sweet about your reel screaming after you've got a big fish on it.
I'll assume that would be your answer to what turns you on as well, right? I skipped that. What sound or noise do you hate?
I think you'll appreciate this. That chirp that the fire alarm makes when the batteries are low absolutely drives me insane.
It's good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know. Make sure your batteries are replaced.
Yeah.
What is your favorite curse word? You can spell it. They don't know.
Well, favorite implies that I use a lot of curse words, but it rhymes with luck.
Okay. I like it. I like it. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt? I mean, you got retirement coming up.
Would I like to attempt? You know, when I had that hiatus, I thought for a while about being a lawyer, and then my senses came to me. You know, I'm not sure how to really answer that. I mean, I thought about, for example, being a fishing guide. There's nothing worse than doing the thing you love the most is work. Nothing worse. I mean, it has to be something you love. So I got to be honest with you, I've kind of arranged this next chapter to be what I kind of call a portfolio life, kind of named after how you might have your wealth management plan put together, right? So I painted a lot when I was young. So I have a studio at the house. So I have a professional artist that lives across the street. So I'll probably do some painting. I'm going to do some more fly fishing, do some more traveling. I got a grandchild. Right now, for those of you that are dialed into my industry, private equity and venture capital is absolutely frothing at the mouth to buy into our businesses. And they are just calling me to consult with them because they don't know our business at all. So there's some consulting business that could be done there. So I just kind of see that as little bits and parts of things that are interesting and fun without actually being fully obligated to anything.
Sounds good to me. Amen. So on the other side, what profession would you not like to do?
That's not a coup, by the way. That's a cry.
Gotta have it.
Not in favor of that one. What I not like to do, what comes to mind is that movie, that show Dirty Jobs. There's a lot of those jobs I do not want to go anywhere near. I mean, animal husbandry? No. There's certain things I won't do. But actually, in my own experience, I mean, just to give you an idea, my father passed when I was young. My mother's family was here and in Portales. I spent 2 summers doing farming and ranching in Portales. That's why I do what I do now. Farming is not high on my list. That is a hard job, very dangerous, and I concluded that would not be something I'd want to do for a living.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Welcome.
Works for me. One final question. So Brad, you were inducted into the Anderson Hall of Fame in 2008 as we transitioned to Brett's recognition here. What did that mean for you, and how did you kind of process that, being this kid who kind of paid $350 for tuition, and you show up here, and now you're getting this big plaque and being recognized as one of the greatest alumni of the institution?
Yeah, and this crossed my mind that this question would come along, and so I did some research, and I'm going to read to you a very brief set of statements that I said that night when I accepted that award, because I still think they're relevant today. So indulge me. I'm going to read them off my phone. Sure. I wish I had a memory good enough to be able to read the whole thing. So this is how it goes. I discovered that sustained business success comes from your drive, and drive being an acronym. Drive is a simple formula consisting of desire, resourcefulness, integrity, vision, and excellence. Desire is more than just wanting something badly. It's being passionate about what you do. It requires you to be caring, have a can-do attitude, and to be unrelenting in the pursuit of your goals. Andy Month once said, "A shot glass of desire is greater than a pitcher of talent." I stand here in front of you today not as a talented man, but as a man filled with desire. Resourcefulness is the ability to accomplish things using what is at hand. Oftentimes it is family, friends, faculty, and business associates. As the TV commercial says, it's the network. Sometimes it's making the most of limited means to reach your goals. Many times it's being faithful that good things will happen. The best business advice I ever received, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. In my own words, I may have been a man of meager means, but I never had meager dreams. Integrity is to do what you say you will do and to be accountable when you're unable. It requires honesty, truthfulness, trustworthiness, principled behavior, and fairness. It means to have a transparent character that you can be proud of. We've all heard the saying that integrity is doing the right thing even when nobody is watching. Well, I believe somebody is always watching, and that somebody is you. Vision is believing your dreams are meant to be achieved. Dreams without purpose are fancy. Dreams as your destiny are motivating. However, we must be wise enough to see things as they are without losing our ability to see things as they might be. For I believe, as did William Bryan Jennings, that destiny is not a matter of chance, but of choice, not something to wish for, but to attain. Excellence is the ability to expect and get the best out of yourself. It is therefore necessary to constantly rediscover what you are made of through challenge. It requires risk-taking, an open mind, and practice. In the words of T. Allen Armstrong, champions do not become champions when they win the event, but in the hours, weeks, months, and years they spend preparing for it. The victorious performance itself is merely the demonstration of their championship character.
Be ready.
Be ready.
Brad, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.